All right, guys. So, good morning, everyone. Okay, so this record will be about the review on Euro USD. It's about the trades I do on Thursday, right? So I'm gonna be breaking down the mistakes I made and the major things I did wrong during my execution time, right? So the mistake here is very outstanding, and I'm not gonna prolong anything here. Just gonna keep this record very short as possible, right? Let's just move straight to the chat and just talk about it and discuss that to learn from the mistakes, right? This is how I do my journaling, right? This is the way of reviewing and journaling my trades, right? To learn from the mistakes I did, right? So let me walk you guys. So here on the screen is Euro USD, right? So during on Tuesday, you can see clearly that the trend is, we are clearly bullish at this point, and this is a recent structure range, which we have this break of structure, and we have this highs and low. So what I was looking out for during my pre-market analysis session was holding on and waiting for price to come down to the discount area so I could look for any buy opportunity. Right. So after marking out my 1 hour swing highs and also the swing low, what I did next was to mark out my demand zones, and this was my extreme demand zone. This was my extreme demand zone right here, right? This was my extreme demand zone, and this is the mid demand zone. This breaker block right here, right, is also demand zone. But these are the two demand zone I was looking out for. But since price was still at this point on Tuesday, right? So I was like, let me, since I have seen clearly that prices clearly making a pullback, right? And where is it gonna make the pullback to? Price gonna just keep making the pullback to the discount zone since we are on a bullish side. So price gonna make the pullback to the discount area, mitigate a demand zone before we start having another huge move to the upside. Okay, so after marking out my structure range, right, marking out my supply and demand zone, I have to be patient to trying to like be patient, be hold on and see price comes down to this point. But what's the point of being waiting when you actually understand the internal structure and know what and understand the fractal structure? That to me, right? Because that's how I tend to trade, right? I might take a counter trend, right? But the counter trend wouldn't be that really. I will really need to understand the structure and also the liquidity and inducement, right? All the stuff that will be happening, right? What I normally looked out for on the higher time frame, even though I'm trading the internal structure or the fractal structure, I always do that in correlation with the higher time frame flow, right? Since I knew that the trend at this point have clearly shift bearish, right? This is where we have the low. Price goes to give us a high, comes down, give us another low, and that's the internal structure we are analyzing. If we were to mark out the 1 hour range structure, right, it should just be this one leg move and this one, right? Because this is where we start seeing demand comes in and take price up, which cause price to break out from the previous high, give us a new higher high. So now what we are waiting is for price to make a lower higher low and continue like this. That's what I am clearly anticipating, like looking out for, right? So to analyze the internal structure, I actually move down to 5 minute time frame to understand what the pullback is doing and where the pullback is heading. Already, of course, I knew what you are seeing here is a Fibonacci tool, right? Anytime I mark out a recent range structure, I normally bring out the 50 to measure from the low to the high since we are on a bullish market and expect price, and then mark out my demand zone, and that demand zone will be within the discount area, right? which is what I have here, which is this two demand zone I have here, one and two, and this is the extreme demand zone, right? Right. So this is how I use my FIP tool, right? So since price wasn't yet, in the discount area, and we were currently, in a pullback vest, right? So I have to, go down and try to understand the internal structure, what the internal structure was doing. And I'm gonna make it very, very, clear to you guys, right? So let's just, move down to it. So coming down to the 5 minute time frame, you can see here very clearly, on the 5 minute time frame. If I'm to mark out the structure, this will be the high, and we have the low, and we have another high, then we have a low, then we have another high. Right after this high, we then have price comes down and take out this high, which give us a market shift, right? Which give us, we then from here, I didn't know that price have shift bearish from here, and this bearish is not overall bearish, right? It just price just shift bearish here to facilitate the 1 hour pullback, right? And which is what we are seeing price, start ranging to the downside, right? So understanding this was when I tend to, try to, you know, follow the bearish move on this 5 minute time frame to until price get to this discount area. Then I can, just leave the market, right? And just reposition myself to the buy side, right? So that was it, right? So this was like the recent structure we have. This is where we have the break. This is where we have the break of the change, right? The 5 minute change, internal market shift, right? The reason why I call this internal is because we are currently trading within the swing structure range. So anything within the swing highs and swing low is internal, right? And anything within the internal structure is fractal, right? And that's where you will need to move down to one minute time frame to analyze the internal. But trust me, I actually moved down to the 1 minute time frame for the execution. But I'm just gonna, bring out the key structure. I'm just gonna mark out the structure on the 5 minute before moving down to 1 minute. So once moved down to 1 minute, anything I'm gonna do within the fractal structure will be in line with this 5 minute structure, which is bearish, right? I'm gonna look out for sell, right? Not buy, right? Of course, we haven't, see price react on this discount area yet. During the pre-market analysis, price was still at this point, right? Price was still at this point. That's why I say we haven't seen price react on the discount area, right? So my target was to drive price to this discount area, which is what you see price, just did, which price actually, stop us out and just move in our direction, right? So I'm just gonna, break down the mistakes. So first of all, before moving down to the execution time frame, which is the 1 minute time frame, I have to, clearly mark out the internal structure to see where our recent structure is at, right? So this is where we have the shift, and price, give us the low, right? And price, give us the low. After giving us this low, price pushed up to this extreme supply zone, right? React on this block and start coming down. This is where we have price, break this structure again, break and close below the previous low we had, right? So let me take this out. Okay, so this is an internal POS. Our code is internal POS, and this, since we are bearish, and this is our new low, right? Which we also have price, take that out. Right? This is what we have here. We have another break of structure. This can clearly tells you that the price is currently bearish. So at this point, this was where I was, right? This was my recent bearish structure range, right? This was my recent structure which I was looking out for. Right, this is the I. This is the 5 minute I. Right, can be swing, right, whatever. But that internal, but this is 5 minute I, and this is 5 minute low. Right, this is the low. This is the low. Right, so I'm just gonna make it speed up a little bit. So zoom in. Let's see that clear. Right, so this is it. Right, so after seeing this, right, after having this structure, and it not price wasn't did not yet move into this discount area, right, which is where we have a demand zone. Right, so price was still within this range. Okay, during the analysis, the pre-market analysis, price was at this point. Right, price was at this point. Right, price was still ranging at this point, trying to go up. So at this point was when I was trying to mark out my supply zone, my relevant supply zone, the zone I'm expecting price to pull back into and react there, for us to see a sharp move to the downside, for us to see a sharp move to this to discount area, since we are the higher time frame is bullish. So we just gonna just take price to this at the equilibrium of this people. Right, once price get here we are out, and that was my target. Right, I was expecting to drive price down to this you know the discount zone. Right, so that it so what I did after marking out my 5 minutes of structure range was to also mark out my supply zone. Right, so this is where I get it wrong. Right, during marking out the supply zone is where I totally get everything wrong. Right, this is where I get it wrong. Right, so what I did here was to also go down to the 5 minute time frame. No, I think I didn't go down to the 5 minute time frame based on what I say, but I still go down to 5 minutes to really understand what was going on within these highs and low, right? Within this 5 minute high and this low. So I have to, go down to 5 minutes to observe 1 minute to observe what was going on here. So I could, mark out the valid point where price is most likely gonna react on before we see another sharp move to the downside. Right, so this was my demand zone. Right, after okay, let me just move down to the 1 minute time frame. So on this 5 minute time frame, note I've marked out my recent range on the 5 minute, which is this high and this low that led to this high that led to this internal break of structure. Right, so this is where we are currently at. So what I'm gonna do is to move down to 1 minute time frame to mark out my relevant supply zone where I'm expecting price to react before going down. Right, so let's move straight into that. Right, so this is when I had to move down to the 5 minute time frame. 5 minute time frame. Now you can see the structure very big and clear, right? Okay, so this is it now. So what I also did on this 5 minute time frame is to understand what was going on this structure right here. Is to understand what is going on here, what has been going on at this point before price break out of that consolidation range, which make price to break the previous low and give us this internal break of structure. Right, so I try to understand everything that goes on here, and what I ignore during the analysis time, the pre-market analysis time, was this also this extreme demand zone. Right, I didn't consider this block because I thought that block was already being used. Right, because if you know, this is where we also have a range. Right, we have a range at this point. We have just a consolidation. Price just consolidate at this point, right, before we have price breakout. Since price break out of this range, price hasn't yet pulled back to mitigate that block. Right, but we just see price just expanding to the downside and price just pushed up. But what the reason why I didn't consider this O order flow, this O This whole range has been a supply zone of this, has been extreme supply zone of this 5 minute time, 5 minute swing structure range. Was that I was closely observing and looking out for imbalance at that point to see if we have an imbalance that that will serve as a magnet for price to drag price to that price will have to move up to that point and fill the imbalance before we start seeing a sharp move to the downside. So that's where I will need to zoom in closely to observe. So here what I see was that we have imbalance at this point, and we have the demand zone here. We have the demand zone here. Yeah, right. This is we have a supply zone, sorry. And notice price at just feel the imbalance right at this point, where price has move up and clear up the imbalance. So there is no another imbalance at this point, right? There is no other imbalance at this point above this up. So all price action at this point is what I consider by efficient, right? Efficient. The others have already been used, right? That's what makes me ignore this whole block and not knowing that this whole block could serve as as a supply zone that will drag price into it to that will cause price to go stop, clear all these eyes and just mitigate this block and go down. And that's what price really did. Right? Price move up and react on that block before going down. But here is where I got my sell position. Remember, I talked about imbalance, just talked about imbalance. So where what I then do was to, since I couldn't see any clear imbalance here, and imbalance I see here at this point has already been used, right? Has already been used, right? So what else did I do? What I do next was to try to understand this flow of price action, right? This flow that we had before price, break the previous low, the previous 5 minute low, right? So let's just move straight to how I got my POI zone, right? So this is it now. Note this is follow the drawing, right? This is where we have a breakout of this block and price range pushed up a bit, come down, pushed up, give us a new lower high, give us a lower low, then price pushed up, take out this high, then comes down again, react on this block, then pushed up again, give us another fractal break of structure, then this become a high and this become the low. And at some point what happen, price later comes down and just boom, take out this low again, which give us another a fractal, which give us which then give us the fractal break of structure again, right? Which give us a fractal break of structure again. I'll just label that fractal POH, right? Which give us a fractal, and this becomes a new eye. This becomes the new fractal swing eye, right? And this become the fractal swing eye. And what we see after that was price, what we see after that was price, after giving us a break of structure, we see price goes up, come down, give us double bottom, double top, right? Double top, equal high at this point, then comes down again. Then before we have price break out of this low, we see price spike up again and clear the liquidity above this high, right? Clear the liquidity above this high and then mitigate this block, right? Mitigate this extreme supply zone, right? Mitigate this supply zone. Then after that mitigation, that's where we then see price, drastically come down and break this structure. Not only this fractal structure, this fractal low, right? We also break it. Also cause price to break the 5 minute internal low, right? Which then tells us that there will be an order at this point, at this inducement liquidity point, right? Here, let me clear the chart and trying to make it a little bit clear. Okay, so this is it now. We have price, take out this block, right? That was a clear inducement liquidity grab there. Then mitigate this block, mitigate this block. And after then price comes down, break this low, give us a fractal low, and not just this low, not just that low, price also comes down and also break the internal low, right, which is the 5 minute low. And that's why I consider this block from this liquidation candle, this block a valid POI zone, and that's where I got my sell position, sell opportunity, right? That's where I got my first sell, right? And that was like my POI zone, and that's what I was expecting price. That's the zone I was expecting price to come up and respect before going down. And this was how the trade was. You can see that clearly on my post, right? This was how the trade was. And where was my target? Since I was expecting this zone to hold, where was my target? My target was this low, right? My target was this discount area, right? This low, because I know price has a high chance of going down and taking that out, right? So that was my first that was my first trade. That was the first decisions I made, and that was my first, you know, trade of the day, and that was on Tuesday, right? That was the first sell position I got. And after taking this loss, after price, notice how price did not just go straight to my SL, right? Notice how price respect that block, right? That was very clear. And if I was really, if I was really, smart enough, should I even say smart enough? Forgive me for saying that. If I was really, kind of like like how can I even put this? If I was really, really, focused enough to this blog, because I think I feel it kind of like, let me just say euphoric, because I believe I was, I strongly believe that this zone would hold, right? But see how many times price, get to react on that block. This is where we have the first mitigation on that block. Let me zoom in and explain something to you guys, that supply zone or demand zone only valid once or twice. That once price mitigate an unmitigational block, right? Once price mitigate a fresh supply zone one and come back again and mitigate the second time. This, if the second time don't just liquidate the first mitigation of that block and just start ranging within that supply zone, just know that that supply zone has lose is that supply zone has lose the strength at that point, right? That it has a high chance of failing, right? So what we see here was a clear respect of this supply zone, right? That's to show that we were right, right? We were right. We were not wrong by identifying this, using this as a POI zone to go for short. Notice how price respect that block. Price come meeting. This is where I got tagged in. This is where I got tapped in, right? I got tapped in at this first touch, right? Right. I got my order get activate at this first mitigation, right? After that, I just spiked down. That to show that there was an order at this point, right? After that, price move up again and just liquidate this high and just comes down. And that wasn't enough for price, because there wasn't enough. Let me just say there wasn't enough supply at this point to cause price to collapse, right? Price needed enough liquidity at this point. Price needed enough buyers at this point to fill their sell order, right? So where will the sell the pending order be? Where will the seller the buyers be, right? That will be on top this, right? Above this eye, right? It will be above this eye, right? above this high, this where the sellers will be, right? Because like let's say for example, I that use this as my POI zone, then I place my SL my entry at this point, got in at this point, my stop loss is just above this so zone, right? So that stop loss itself is the buy order, right? That simply means that I'm telling my broker, if price did not go in my favor, they should buy back my contract at this point, right? They should buy back my contract. That's what stop loss on this in this it actually means at this point. And that that it wasn't only me, right? There are a lot of buying power like others at this point. So there are a lot of means that price could just goes up and grab enough buying power at this point before feeling their activating their sell order, right? So what happened then? Price just react on that block. Price react clearly on this block, this supply zone, before dropping, right? We see price dropping, right? It dropped very nice, right? And after that, what happened? Because there wasn't enough liquidity at this point to drive price down. What does price do? Price just spike up again to grab a lot of liquidity, right? To take out enough orders at this buy orders at this point to fuel their move. And that's when price move up and react on this demand zone, this extreme demand supply zone, sorry, right? And this is a supply zone, right? And why? Because if I were to clearly mark out a good zone, right? This is like the entire internal range, right? We have swing high here, 5 minute swing high, we have the low, and this is like the extreme supply zone, and everything around this side is just the mid supply zone. So price, that's why price utilize this block, this my POI, right? This is where price had to utilize the POI zone and moved up to get enough fuel to you know excuse me, right? Move up, utilize this block and move up to mitigate this other block, right? And it's still within the swing high, right? The internal structure, which is the 5 minute high and 5 minute low. And that's it, right? That was the clear mistakes I made, right? And the reason why I consider that to be my POI zone, of course, I explained it earlier, right? Because it's grab liquidity, and with what we see here, it also the block also lead to a break of structure, right? Not just the fractal break of structure, also the internal break of structure. That's why I consider this, and it also has the liquidity above it, right? But there wasn't still enough order at this point, right? That's why price has to move up, and that's why price still has to move up and liquidate the order above, grab the liquidity above this high, right? Grab the liquidity above this high before falling down, right? So that was it, right? That was the mistake that I made, right? And if I really understand, if I was really active in the market, right? Was I even active, right? Yes, but I was still, believing that this zone will hold, right? Even after price breakout of this, of my POI zone, that's where I think that since price has break out of this zone, then this zone could have served like as a backup block, right? To make price, stay bullish, right? To make price continue bullish move. That's where I get it wrong. Because if I'm to consider this block a shift, a market shift at this point, right? When we already have a high at this point, it wouldn't even make sense for me to even consider this to be a market shift. Consider that break to be a market shift. Why? Because it's very clear. This is a valid point. This is a valid point. Until price take out the 5 minute internal high, then we are still bearish, right? Until price take out the 5 minute internal high, then we are still bearish, right? We can't shift the bias until price comes up and take out this. That's where we can expect price to pull back to some certain demand zone and continue going up, right? So that's it, right? So that was it, right? So that was the mistakes I made by not, identifying, considering this extreme supply zone, right? Just using this one, right? So if I later realize, if after price, stop me out, and you know, I tend to like observe where price, really react on, after notice how price, after taking out the block. If price were to continue go up, the momentum wouldn't have been reduced, right? The price momentum at this point wouldn't have been reduced, right? Price would have still, price would have just, keep spiking up, keep going up. But you see, immediately price, grab the utilize this, this POI zone, price, goes up and start, ranging down and start, surging down. That means that price has, fuel the order. This point has, price has, grabbed enough liquidity, right? Price has then grabbed enough liquidity that will, cause price to collapse, right? So that was it, and that was the mistake. I believe you guys, anyone watching this video to this point, is able to understand everything I break down. This is my way of understanding the market, my way of doing analysis, and trying to understand the market. This is how I tend to do my analysis and understand my market structure, right? So not just the fractal structure and the internal structure, the swing structure. I always start my day analysis on the the 4 hour, the daily, for sometimes weekly, to have a big, view of what is happening before coming down to the medium time frame, or the lower time frame, which is the 1 minute and the 5 minute time frame. So the three structure I deal with is mainly, is just the internal structure, the swing structure, internal structure, and the fractal structure. Those are the three structure I work within, and also apply liquidity concept, yeah, liquidity concept, right, and inducement, right? Because if you cannot spot liquidity, then you are the liquidity. Like what I did here, I couldn't spot the liquidity, then I get to, do the liquidity, which price, goes up, take my SL, mitigate this block, and just move in my way, right? You see clearly, that was it, right? That was it, and this is where the price, then becomes, price give us a new internal low, and this becomes the new internal high. I won't talk about what happened here. After, I'm just gonna, talk about the mistakes I made on Tuesday and what I did wrong, and which is what I just, explained. And here is where my next uh buy position, because I took two position that day. One sell, this was the first position, and the second buy, and this is where I get in on the buy. Of course, I already say, after price take out this my POI, I wasn't considering this block to be a valid block to hold price down. I actually zoom out a bit on the 15-minute time frame, right? I zoom out to the 15-minute time frame to, try to see why price, why that block fell, and why price, didn't just respect the POI zone and just, smash through the POI zone, right? I have to, let me clear this chart first, right? So can make it a little bit, bring more clarity. So here is the next buy position I took, right? After that zone fell, right, I tend, to come up to this 15-minute time frame, and what did I see on the 15-minute time frame was this, right? Then this guy is low, right? So this is it. What I tend to, notice on this 15 minute was considering all these things as being the liquidity grab, right? Considering all this has been the liquidity grab, that was like my equal double bottom, right? Or up about triple bottom, right? And seeing price, coming down, grabbing this and just start ranging at this point, I was like, almost price could, possibly, spike up from this, from this point, right? Just spike up from this point and keep going since the bullish, mm, since the higher time frame is still is very bullish, right? And what I failed to understand was that price hasn't yet, even when price was still ranging at this point, what I failed to understand was that price hasn't yet mitigate a discount zone, right? Price hasn't yet moved down to our discount range, so discount level. So price was still on the premium range, right? Which is still overboard for price, right? So what that's what I failed to know, right? Because I wish I noticed that, and I was really strategic and very logical with my decision. Making that second trade, that second buy position wouldn't have happened because I would have been patient and wait until price, comes down and mitigate this equilibrium or this discount area, right? Would have just wait to see price mitigate this block before going on the buy. And I wish I waited that way. I wish you know I make that decisions. I was patient and logical and expecting price to mitigate this discount range before going on that buy. This is where I would have just go on the buy immediately. Price mitigate. This is where I would have after having price mitigate the equilibrium, like react on the discount range. This is and start having this consolidation. This is where I would have just go in on the long, and my short, my stop loss below the low, and my target would have been just 1:4 RR, right? Would have been just 1:4, right? This is what I would have done if I was patient enough. But I failed to do that, and I jumped in on this buy position at this point. After getting stopped out, I jumped in on the buy position, and my stop loss was very tiny at this point, right? And I was expecting price to just blast through these highs and just keep going up. That's what I was expecting, and failed to understand that price at this point, price hasn't yet moved to our discount range, so it's still overbought, right? We are expecting price to come down to our discount range for us to look for entry, right? So jumping in at this point wasn't a good idea, right? On the second position, right? Wasn't a good idea, right? I clearly shift my SL, right? I shift my SL, right? Because after having price break up and just consolidate around here, and I tend to jump in on that buy, and my stop loss was just below this week. Let me zoom in a bit, right? My stop loss was just below this week, right? And moving down, and due to the structure here and what I feel, what I consider by double bottom and liquidity grab at this point, I had to notice that since I've already jumped in on a buy at this point, that wasn't nice at all, and where my stop loss was at wasn't safe, and I knew that that place wasn't safe, that it's easy for price to just come down and take me out, and still could even and still go in my way, right? That was it, right? So what happened was, that was where I had to shift my SL, and my risks also increased, right? That's when my risks also increased, shifting my SL, and the risk, the little I risk on this position, bringing my SL to this down, because I think this was the safest place my SL could be for price to. And if this block fell, then we can see price, go down to this point. And already I had already jumped in, right? This wasn't a good entry. If I was to even go on a long position, this wouldn't have been where I would have go on the long. This would have been the proper zone to I would have been patient for price to come down and mitigate this block, right? This block, feel this imbalance and mitigate this other block here, this other block, right? And this is where I would have go on the position. This is where my entry would have been, and my SL below this low. This is how the trade would have looked like, right? And my target would have just still be 1:4, and this is how it would have been, right? But I jumped in already at this point because I feel that price gonna keep spiking up, right? That also, these are also the mistakes that that was also the mistakes I made, right? And this was the second position. And what happened next? I just, comes down and hit my ASO, mitigate the discount area and start, spiking up, right? And I was out, and with this huge loss, right? With this huge loss, right? So that was it. And that was it. That was just the trades I that was just the mistakes that I made, and that was the whole thing. That was how everything was like that on Tuesday, right? So this will be the end of this record, so I can focus on the current market, current price action now, and just see what I can have for today. Right, so that was it about the Tuesday trade. I hope you guys understand everything I talked, and this is my way of reviewing my trade and learning from my mistakes, right? So I advise, strongly advise any one of you, like not any one of you. I strongly advise you guys to also be doing a post market like this. If you can't do a video record like this, then you can simply just write down, journal your trade, have your way of tracking your trades, right? So that you could clearly know what you did wrong yesterday, right? So you can't just take loss today and just ignore ignore that and just move on to the next trading day. And bro, what the fuck? What you looking out for? Because you're gonna, like, if you can't review your previous trade and you tend to start the next day and just, bro, you're gonna take loss again. And even though you take win, bro, it's a trap, right? Right, even though you win again, you will just be ignoring why you even win that trade and just be happy about your win, and without even knowing why you win that trade in the first place. So this is my way of documenting my trade, and I strongly advise you guys to also, if you are really passionate and really this is your professions and you really enjoy trading and you really believe in this, I believe you should also track your trade and your activities like this. Just track your trade, journal your trade, and however, anyhow you just wanna be, because anytime, to me, anytime I take loss and even take profit and even take wins and take loss, and trust me, once I take loss, that doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is when I have the satisfaction is when I review the trade and see why, the main reason why I get it right, and also the reason why I get it wrong. If it was loss and I review the trade and realize my mistake like I did, now my mind is clear. I wouldn't have to worry again. I will even feel more energized to, you know, be, learn other things too, because I've learned from the mistakes. I know what I did. If someone asks me why do you lose the money, I can bring you to the chat and just show you that this is what I did wrong and show you what I would have do better. Right? It's hope, right? It might not make sense now for you, but it just compound, right? That's just it. Right. So that will be the end of this record, guys. So thank you for watching to this point. So if you enjoy all this and you love the way I do my analysis and the way I understand my market structure, and you just love the way I explain this, you can just comment your thoughts, right? Even though you don't love what I do, but you still get your time to watch this record till this point, just comment your whatever you have in mind, and just comment, share your thought, or just you can just follow up if you know how I do my review. You can just follow up to also learn from this, because I believe you have learned a lot from this. My Wi-Fi is off, so that will be the end of this record, guys. Have a blessed and profitable week ahead. Okay, love you all.